Hello and welcome to the Rogers Brief. I'm Adam Rogers. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Today was day 62 of the Mass Casualty Commission proceedings and marked the start of phase 3 of the proceedings. Phase 3 is focused on recommendations and sort of going through, test driving some recommendations, having organizations come in and give their interpretation of what we've heard so far in terms of forward-looking advice for the Commission. We heard in phase 1, more or less, the factual foundation as the Commission sees it. Phase 2, we heard from lots of expert witnesses as terms of their various fields of study. Phase 3 is getting into recommendations. But before I talk about that, and today we heard some victim services agencies and witnesses giving their advice, recommendations. But before I talk about that, I want to talk about something I saw pop up on Friday, and this was this announcement by the Mass Casualty Commission that they were delaying their final report. Now, first of all, just the timing of that news, which is just modus operandi for the Commission to give these bad news releases late on a Friday afternoon when nobody's paying attention or they think nobody is. I happened to be at my computer because I was about to do an interview with Ben O'Hara-Byrne for a little conversation with Ben O'Hara-Byrne, and it was scheduled for late in the afternoon, so I just happened to be checking through Twitter, and there I see this announcement from the Commission. And by the way, they don't identify it as a 5-month delay. They say the report, which was due November 1st, is now going to be delivered March 31st. You're thinking, oh, wait a second, that's only 4 months. And I'm sure this is all deliberate, right? November, December, January, February, March. Oh, that's 4. No, it's not. I think they're trying to, I don't know how stupid they think we are sometimes or whatever, but this was definitely done on purpose. Instead of going from November 1st to April 1st or to March, there's this subtle little thing where it's like, oh, is that 4 months? No, it's 5 months of a delay. And so when I tweeted it out, I made sure I mentioned that it's 5 months, not 4, as they may have been subtly trying to imply by saying November to March. Well, it's the 1st of November to the 31st of March of a delay. So that was interesting. Just as interesting were the reasons they gave for the delay. So they gave 5 different reasons. One is that there was a broad mandate and a tight timeline. Well, of course, that was known from the beginning when they agreed to and committed themselves to meeting this November 1st deadline, that they had a broad mandate. And by the way, the Commission themselves has broadened the mandate. I mean, the mandate said a certain thing, the orders in council, but the Commission themselves have broadened the mandate. Like just today, for example, with these victim services organizations, the mandate is to look into victim services to make sure that people were treated appropriately. Well, the Mass Casualty Commission has taken that as instructions to look at the entire spectrum of potential victim services issues and just have everybody in to say whatever they want, just under that umbrella. Well, that's broadening their own mandate. It could have been a focused mandate on the actual victims, the actual families, and their services that they required. That's been expanded. So that was the first reason. Second one is the start time was adjusted 2 times. Well, this is clearly the Mass Casualty Commission's own fault. They were supposed to start last October, pushed back into February. And so that was all to create these foundational documents, which I've argued before were leaned on too heavily or maybe completely unnecessary. They could have been having hearings with witnesses, going through and establishing the factual record that way. Instead, they wanted to control the narrative, provide these foundational documents to the participants, have limited witnesses with limited examination coming in. So that's why they started, 4 or 5 months late. So that was, of course, it's a reason to push things back, and I wasn't surprised by that, but it's not anybody else's fault but the Mass Casualty Commissions themselves. The third one is COVID. COVID made an investigation tough. Yes, of course, you have to put COVID into any delay excuse these days. Fourth one was that the disclosure is disorganized, that they've received. The disclosure is, disorganized. Well, yes, you've got a staff of 70 plus people. Organize it. That's not a great excuse. And then the last one they use again, dealing with disclosure, is that the pace and unpredictability and the volume of disclosure has just been unwieldy and that they've had to deal with that. Well, again, you've got a big staff. You have to be prepared for these kinds of things, and that's, you have to expect that. I mean, everybody, any lawyer's used to dealing with disclosure, and it's not always terribly well organized, and you have to be organized yourself and deal with it. So those were their 5 excuses. They closed that little section of their release that was made Friday afternoon by saying that their report will be substantial and with the care and attention, drafted with the care and attention that it deserves. Well, of course, you'd expect nothing else. All right, so the Mass Casualty Commission report we'll see at the end of March. My report that I'm working on already is I'm still planning to release that in October. No delay there. Early October. Was planning to do it 2 weeks prior to the Mass Casualty Commission's own report. So that's still my intention. By the way, that means in the meantime, when I do these reports, I watch the commission. I'm sort of drafting as I go my written piece for the day. I'm not going to do those daily written pieces anymore while I'm working on the final report. It takes a lot of energy to write those pieces, and so I'd rather, I like making notes throughout the day, doing these videos, but I'm also working on the final report, and so thinking about all those things as I'm going along. So that's still my commitment to you to have these daily posts. The one coming up on Wednesday might be and Thursday might be a little delayed or at weird times because I'm actually going to play at the Nationals, Canadian Fast Pitch Nationals, the over 40 edition. I used to go to the main draw. Now I'm in the Masters division, and so I'll be going, and we have our first game Wednesday afternoon. We play 2 games on Thursday, so that'll be during the commission proceedings, so I'll be delayed in getting those posts out. I may not be quite as well dressed over Newfoundland. I'm not planning to bring suit and tie with me, so you get to see all of that, and so looking forward to a good time over there. Now, speaking of all the things, if you watched anything Mass Casualty Commission today, including this video, what I would encourage you to watch is this great piece on Sportsnet that Jamie Campbell did about the Blair boys, Tyler, Jack, and Alex, that went to a baseball game, the Blue Jays game. Their dad was a big fan of the Blue Jays and the Montreal Canadiens, but the Blue Jays. So Jamie Campbell got in touch with the Blair boys, heroic boys that they are, and their older brother Tyler, and they got to take a trip to Toronto, get to a Blue Jays game. Looked like a great game too. Alex Manoah start, most exciting pitcher in the league pretty much. Teoscar Hernandez home run. They got to meet Bo Bichette. Looked like they met a couple of Montreal Canadiens that were there at the game as well. So a great piece. It's about just under 9-minute long piece on Sportsnet. I encourage people to look for that. So good way to help with the dealing with the trauma of all this. And so kudos to the Blue Jays and Jamie Campbell for arranging that. So today there was 2 things, basically. One was a presentation from Jennifer Cox, one of the Mass Casualty Commission lawyers, who was from Dalhousie Legal Aid before that, looking at a previously made recommendations in these fields that the Mass Casualty Commission is caring about, and just to, I guess, do what was called an environmental scan of existing commissions, existing recommendations. This presentation could have been entitled, Why Nothing Ever Really Changes, even though it definitely should, because there's so many of these recommendations that come along and just don't seem to catch on after they're made. And so I know as part of this presentation, part of the reason for it is to just identify that and just look at ways that this commission can do things differently, ensure that there's some follow-up and some accountability there. So we'll see if that works out. Now, the scan was there was over 2,000 previous recommendations in these various fields. So there's lots of good material already. So there'll be some, I guess, pressure on the commissioners to come out with recommendations that are going to be workable and practical under all those circumstances, and considering how difficult it is to get recommendations that actually stick. All right, so that was the first part of that. Took place in the morning, and there's a report that's going to be posted to the Commission's website that deals with those, I think, 70 some previous commissions, 2,000 total recommendations covered. So that'll all be in the document. Also, there'll be documents coming from these victim advocacy groups, and that was basically what the afternoon was dedicated to covering, which were what they call participant consultations. The Commission calls participant consultations. And so today we had, there was a presentation from Inspector Thomas Warfield and Detective Constable Helen Burton from the Peel Regional Police, just outside of Toronto, and then Constable Danielle Bottineau from the Toronto Police, and then attending participants, attendees, in addition, were Julia Rustad from the RCMP H Division Victim Services, Michelle Seaman from the Government of Canada Vulnerable Persons Unit, Dana Bowden from the Nova Scotia Department of Justice Victim Services, Aline Vlascano, Executive Director of the Canadian Resource Centre for Victims of Crime. And then there were 3 people from the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police National Working Group Supporting Victims of Terrorism and Mass Violence, those being Sue O'Sullivan, Maria McDonald, and Sushil Gupta. So those were, some interesting stuff. They're all very granular stuff with and lots of sort of victim of advocacy lingo and looking for resources and better communication, coordination, and all of those things you would expect. So I'm not going to go through all of the discussions that were held. I know the attendees and the participants probably found it very fascinating and put a lot of work into it. I doubt that very many people were actually watching this, or many people will read the reports as well. So unfortunate perhaps, but there's going to be recommendations for robust victim services response to these kind of incidents, and everybody will do the best they can, and that'll be that. Here's another interesting part I thought of, just because I'm not always trying to in these videos delve into the content of what was said so much as sort of the legal side of it. And here's something to think back on. Remember when we were all talking about cross-examination of witnesses and how important that was? One of the responses was, well, we can't be just opening it up to cross-examination because there are 61 participants and we could have endless cross-examination. Well, here we're seeing today what it really means in some cases to be a participant. It's not the family participants that have full rights and would cross-examine. It's these other organizations that you submit a paper to the commission, and you might get a few minutes of airtime to make a few comments and say your piece and be thanked for your work, and that's it, right? So for many of these organizations, the participation today in phase 3 for 20 minutes each of speaking time, that's it. That's what they get. That's the level of their participation. So not expected to be part of any cross-examination of witnesses or anything like that. So it was an exaggeration of a point at the time, and now we're seeing some of how those organizations actually participate. So, all right, that's all I'm going to talk about today. And like I say, the big news I think really was the delay in proceedings, which barely warranted a mention at the beginning of the day today. That's a major delay, 5 months. By the way, it was 5 months that was requested and granted. So requested by the commission and granted by both the federal and provincial governments. So, if anybody's asking or criticizing the delay, it's not just that the commission requested it, it was granted by both levels of government, which have oversight and sort of real control of the commission if they wished to take it. Okay, that's it for today, day 62 of the Mass Casualty Commission proceedings. I'll be back Thursday with back Wednesday with gender-based organizations that will be doing much of the same as we saw today. A presentation, reactions, and some question and answer stuff to go along from the commissioners. Okay, thanks again for watching, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.